I found out my entire family tree was a lie in the middle of a will reading, of all places, sitting in a strip mall law office between a ficus and a photo of a beach, when the attorney cleared his throat and said, "Given the prior adoption arrangement in 1986, your mother felt it was fairest that the Maple Street house remain in the direct line of the biological mother," and everyone in the room froze except me, because I was the only one who didn't know that when he said biological mother, he meant my older sister Beth and not the woman I had just buried. I'm 39 years old. I have a husband, a 14-year-old son, a small mortgage, and what I thought was a pretty standard, slightly old-school family. My parents were older than most growing up. Mom had me at 42, Dad was 45, and my sister Beth was 16 years ahead of me. People used to assume she was my young mom and my mom was my grandma. We'd correct them, laugh it off. I grew up with a lot of, "We waited so long for you," and "You were our surprise baby from God." We were church people. Potlucks, bake sales, Wednesday night Bible study. We weren't rich, but there was always food, always a roof, always this sense that family was everything. Family was everything and also slightly off. I was spoiled in the sense that I was always reminded how lucky I was. Lucky they hadn't stopped at one child. Lucky they didn't send me away to boarding school when I was mouthy. Lucky they let me live in their house as an adult after my divorce, until I got back on my feet. Lucky, 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 like a charm worn so long it started to chafe. When my dad died 5 years ago, my mom held the family together with a combination of casseroles and guilt. Beth lived across town with her husband and 2 kids. I lived 10 minutes away. I was the one who took mom to her appointments, fixed her Wi-Fi, got her groceries during COVID, shoveled her driveway. Beth did the bigger stuff. Sat with mom at the lawyer's office, helped her refinance the house once, talked to the financial advisor. "You're better with people, I'm better with paperwork," she'd say to me, not unkindly. We all do our part. 6 months ago, my mom had a stroke. It wasn't sudden. She'd been getting more forgetful, more frail. But the stroke took what little independence she had left. She spent 2 weeks in the hospital, 3 more in rehab, didn't really come back the way we hoped. She died one rainy Thursday night, with Beth holding one hand and me holding the other. We planned the funeral like 2 halves of her. Beth handled the church, the music, the slideshow. I handled the food, the guest list, making sure the glorious mess of her life was represented. We were exhausted and brittle and, I thought, united. So sitting in that lawyer's office a couple of weeks later, I wasn't thinking about secrets. I was thinking about who was getting mom's jewelry, how we were going to sell or keep the house, whether there would be any money left after medical bills. The attorney, Mr. Jacobs, was a soft-spoken man with kind eyes. He'd helped my parents with their wills for years. Beth sat closest to him. Her husband, Nick, sat beside her. I sat on the other side with my husband, Mark. There was an envelope on the table with my mother's handwriting on it. I recognized it from 1,000 lunchbox notes and birthday cards. "Okay," Mr. Jacobs said. "Your mother updated her will after your father's passing and again after her stroke. She was in her right mind and understood what she was doing. I know this is emotional, but I'd ask that you let me read through it before asking questions." We nodded. He began with the usual formalities, revoking prior wills, appointing an executor, Beth, which made sense, small bequests to church and charity. Then, "To my younger daughter Lisa, I leave the sum of $10,000 in recognition of her years of help and care, as well as my jewelry box and its contents." He glanced up at me with what looked like genuine sympathy. $10,000. I blinked. That wasn't nothing, but it also wasn't the house, the savings, the little nest egg mom had always said she'd leave for the girls. "To my older daughter Beth, my biological daughter and the biological mother of my younger daughter under the adoption arrangement of 1986, I leave the house at 412 Maple and the remainder of my estate, including savings and investments, to pass to her and her children." My ears started ringing. My stomach flipped. I looked at Beth. Her face had gone completely white. Mark's hand tightened around mine. Wait, I said, before Mr. Jacobs could go on. What did you just say? He cleared his throat, flustered. I'm sorry, he said. I know the wording is unusual. Your mother insisted on being explicit about the prior adoption. She didn't want there to be confusion about the line of inheritance. The what? I said. What adoption? Nobody spoke. Nick stared at the table. Mr. Jacobs looked back and forth between us like he'd just realized the grenade he'd dropped. This is not how I would have chosen for you to find out, he said slowly. I assumed. I was told this was not a secret. Find out what? I asked, my voice higher than I meant it to be. Beth finally looked at me. Tears were already in her eyes. Lisa, she whispered. I was going to tell you. Mom, she made me promise not to until what? The credits rolled. I snapped. What are we talking about? Mr. Jacobs closed the folder gently. Your mother and father adopted you as an infant in 1986, he said. Your birth mother was a minor at the time. Your older sister, Beth. The room tilted. For a second, I genuinely thought I might pass out. I laughed, a short, ugly bark. That's not funny, I said. That's not. You can't just say that like you're reading the weather. Lisa, Beth said again, reaching for my hand. I jerked back. No, I said. No. You don't get to call me your little sister for 39 years, and then suddenly be my mother in a legal document because it's convenient for a house. It wasn't like that, she said, crying now. I was 18, I was pregnant, Mom and Dad were. You know how they were. They said they'd adopt you, raise you as theirs so I could still have a life, go to college, not be a single mom. It was a different time. It was the 80s, not the 50s, I said. And you all just what? Decided I never needed to know. They told me they'd tell you when you were older, Beth said. Then older became after high school. Then after college. Then after your divorce. Every time I brought it up, Mom would say, why hurt her with something she doesn't need to know? She was so afraid of, I don't know, losing you. Losing the story. Her story, I said. Not mine. My heart was pounding. Memory fragments flashed. Teachers assuming my parents were my grandparents. The way Mom could never quite remember the details of my birth story. The fact that there were hardly any baby pictures of me before 6 months. All those times people thought you were my mom, I said, staring at Beth. The way you'd get weird and change the subject. The way Mom would swoop in and say, no, I'm the mother, she's just the big sister. The way you cried like someone had died the day I left for college, even though we hadn't been that close. You knew. She nodded, sobbing. I knew, she said. And I hated myself for it. But they were so intense about it. Mom swore she'd disown me if I ever told you. She said I'd be taking you away from her, that you were her baby, that God had given you to her. God, I repeated, laughing again. God and an adoption lawyer. I'm so sorry, Mr. Jacobs said quietly. I truly believed you knew. Your mother was insistent that the language about biological go in the will. Weirdly big deal about my gratitude, like I was supposed to be extra thankful for existing. She said she wanted everything to be clear before the Lord. I cautioned her that it might come as a shock, but she said, no, she knows. The betrayal hit in layers. First, the basic fact. My entire identity had been misrepresented to me my whole life. Then the second punch. They had finally chosen to write the truth down, not to tell me, but to justify leaving almost everything to Beth. So let me get this straight, I said. I find out the woman I buried last week was my grandmother, not my mother. The woman sitting next to me is my biological mother. And you all decided the appropriate time to mention this was in the same sentence where you explain why I don't get the house. It's not about the house, Beth said weakly. Mom wanted it to stay in the real bloodline, I finished for her. Got it. Mark squeezed my knee. Maybe we should take a minute, he murmured. Outside. I stood up so fast my chair scraped. No, I said. We're going to finish this circus. Then I'm going to burn it to the ground. We let Mr. Jacobs finish reading. There wasn't much else for me. The $10,000, the jewelry box, some sentimental items, the house, the savings, the life insurance, everything that could actually change someone's life, went to Beth in trust for herself and her children. There was a letter in the envelope, addressed to me in Mom's loopy script. I couldn't bring myself to open it in that office. I tucked it into my bag like a live wire. When it was over, Beth reached for me again. "Lee," she said, the nickname only she ever used. "Please, let's talk." "Not here. Come over, Will. I have to pick up Evan from school," I said. My voice sounded like it belonged to someone else. "We'll talk." In the car, I finally broke. Mark drove. I pressed my forehead to the window and sobbed like something had been cut out of me with no anesthesia. "She's still the woman who raised you," Mark said gently, "whatever the labels were." "And she lied to me every day," I said. "She stood in my kitchen and told my son stories about when I was pregnant with your mom that never happened. She celebrated my birthday every year on a date that meant something completely different to her than it did to me. She let me think I was her miracle baby when I was really her, what? Redemption project? Her second chance to get motherhood right." That night, after Evan was in bed, I sat at the dining table with the letter from the envelope. Mark sat across from me, silent. My hand shook as I opened it. "My dearest Lisa," it began. "If you're reading this, I'm with Jesus now, and you finally know the truth I never could find the courage to tell you." My stomach clenched. She acknowledged it in the second sentence. "I did not carry you in my body," she wrote. "Beth did. But I carried you in my heart before you were even born, when she came to me crying and ashamed, and I saw how this world would treat her if people knew. We made a plan, the three of us, me, your daddy, and Beth, that we would give you a proper home with married parents and a stable name. We went down to the courthouse, we signed the papers, and you became ours in the eyes of the law, just like you were already ours in the eyes of God." She wrote about how afraid she was people would gossip, how much pressure there was in the church, how she'd already been teased for having one foot in the grave when she had Beth in her 20s, and how the idea of being a grandmother in her 40s with an unwed pregnant teen daughter almost killed her. "I knew if people found out, they'd call you a mistake," she wrote. "And you were never a mistake. You were my second chance to be a better mother. I decided then and there that the story of your birth didn't matter, only the story we chose to live." She never once used the word lie. She called it a story, a choice, a promise. She wrote, "We said we'd tell you when you were older, but every time I looked at you I was so scared you'd hate me and leave me that I couldn't open my mouth. I thought I'd have more time. I thought God would give me the right words. I'm so sorry if this hurts you. Please forgive your old mama for being selfish with the truth." There was a paragraph about the house. "As for Maple Street, you have always said you don't like this old place, that the stairs hurt your knees and the neighborhood is going downhill," she wrote. "Beth has done so much to help me keep it up, and her kids need a stable home. You and Mark have your house. I trust you to make your own way. This is not because I love you any less. It is because everything started with Beth, and it feels right that it continue with her." I read that line 3 times. Everything started with Beth. I thought about how she'd always called Beth my first miracle, and me my last gift from God. How she'd tell people, "I got one of each, the responsible one and the wild one." I realized with a kind of cold clarity that in her mind, I had never been entirely mine. I had always been part of Beth's story, a secret chapter, not an independent book. The next few weeks were a blur of grief layered over grief. Grief for my mother as I had known her. Grief for the mother I apparently had who had never been allowed to be my mother. Grief for the childhood I thought I'd had and the one I actually had. I started noticing things in my memory I'd glossed over. The way Beth had been strangely strict with me when we were younger, like a mini-mom. How she'd grounded me once at 19 for coming home drunk from a party, even though it was technically Mom and Dad's house and Mom just told me to sleep it off. How Beth had once said during an argument, "I gave up my entire life for this family. then clapped her hand over her mouth like she'd said too much. How my parents had always made I ordered a certified copy of my birth certificate out of sheer stubbornness. The one I'd always used listed my parents as Mary and Robert Thompson, occupation homemaker, and mechanic. The one that arrived in the mail had tiny print at the bottom. Amended record. Original sealed pursuant to adoption. I stared at that line for a long time. There was a case number. I gave it to a friend of mine who works at the county clerk's office. A week later, she slid an envelope across the table at lunch. "I can't officially show you this," she said, "but off the record you deserve to see it." Inside were photocopies of the original adoption petition. Maternal mother, Elizabeth Thompson. Paternal father, putative not present, name redacted. Child, baby girl Thompson, born at St. Andrew's Hospital, 1986. There was also a form where my grandparents petitioned to adopt, citing their stable marriage, long-standing community ties, and ability to provide a suitable Christian home. Attached was a letter from a social worker recommending the adoption, noting that placing the child with maternal grandparents as legal parents will help avoid stigma in their conservative community. There was also another document that made my blood boil. A notice of approval for a small monthly stipend to my grandparents as foster-to-adopt parents during the first year. So not only had they taken me in, they'd been paid, however modestly, to do it. That in itself isn't evil. Plenty of foster parents get stipends, but paired with a lifetime of hearing, "We sacrificed everything for you," it hit differently. I brought the paperwork to Beth's house on a Sunday afternoon. She made coffee with shaking hands. Her living room smelled like vanilla candles and something baking. Her kids were at a friend's. Nick was in the garage. It was just us. "You did your homework," she said, eyeing the manila folder. "Of course you did. You were always the one who wanted to know how the magic trick worked." "This isn't a magic trick," I said. "It's my life." I laid the documents on the table between us. The original petition, the social worker letter, the stipend notice. Her face crumpled when she saw the petition. "I haven't seen that since I was 18, she murmured. "Mom, keep everything," I said, "except the one thing that belonged to me." She wiped her eyes. "I wanted to tell you so many times," she said softly. "When you got your first period and you were terrified, I wanted to sit you down and say, 'I know exactly what you're going through because I was pregnant at your age, and this is how my body felt.' When you had that pregnancy scare at 17, I wanted to tell you, 'I know what it's like to sit in a bathroom and stare at a plus sign.' When you had Evan, and Mom was hovering and taking over everything, I wanted to push her out of the room and say, 'Let me be here for you the way I wish someone had been for me.' And every time I tried, Mom would clamp down. She'd say, 'You will not take this from me. We made a deal.' She threatened to cut me off, to take you and move, to tell the church I was a whore. I was a coward. I let her decide." "You were a kid," I said, because some part of me could still see her as the terrified 18-year-old she'd been. "But you weren't a kid when I was 20 and 25 and 30. You weren't a kid when Dad died. You weren't a kid last month." She flinched. "I know," she said. "I told myself there was never a good time. You were always going through something. High school, college, your divorce, new job, motherhood. I didn't want to dump this on you on top of everything. And then Mom had the stroke and she said she was finally going to tell you herself. She said she'd written you a letter. I thought that would be her burden, not mine. I was selfish. I didn't want to be the bad guy." "So you let her tell it in a will," I said. "In a sentence about the house." Tears spilled over. "I begged her not to put it in there," she said. I said, "Either tell her now the right way or don't write it at all." She told me I was weak, that she wasn't going to stand before God with a lie on paper. She said, "If you won't be my witness, the lawyer will." I thought maybe she really had told you and I just didn't know when. She said she had. We sat in silence for a bit, the only sound the refrigerator humming. "Who's my father?" I asked finally. She looked down at her hands. It doesn't matter, she said. He never wanted. It matters to me, I interrupted. He's half of where I come from. He's why my eyes are this color and my hands look like this. His medical history is inside my body. It matters. She took a breath. His name was Tom, she said. Tom Miller. He was 21 working at the gas station on Route 4. Mom hated him. She said he was trash, that he was using me. We were stupid. We weren't careful. When I got pregnant, he wanted to get married. Mom said absolutely not. She said she'd rather raise another baby than be tied to a loser. I was terrified. She told him if he cared about me, he'd sign away his rights so I could have a normal life. He did. I haven't seen him since. Did he ever reach out? I asked. She hesitated just long enough that I knew the answer. There were letters, she admitted. At first. He sent a couple to the house. Mom burned them. She told me he'd moved on, that he didn't care. I found out later he'd called a few times too. She told him I'd changed my mind and didn't want contact. She said it was better that way. Clean break. I thought about the sealed envelope in the courthouse file, the one labeled correspondence from putative father. He tried, I said, more to myself than to her. And Mom shut it down. I don't know where he is now, Beth said. I haven't let myself look. If he built a life, I don't want to blow it up. My life is already blown up, I said. I get to decide which pieces I pick up. She winced. That's fair, she said. Do you hate me? The question hung between us. I thought about the way she braided my hair for picture day, the way she'd let me sleep in her room when I had nightmares, the way she'd driven me to college in her rusty Honda and cried the whole way home. I thought about the time she'd also been cruel in that older sister way that sliced deeper than any parental scolding, calling me spoiled, dramatic, Mom's favorite, even though now I could see how backwards that really was. I don't know what I feel, I said honestly. I'm angry. I'm hurt. I feel like someone swapped the labels on my life. But I don't hate you. I hate what you did. I hate that you let Mom's fear decide everything. I hate that the first time anyone wrote the truth down, it was to explain why I'm not entitled to the house I spent my childhood cleaning. You always said you hated that house, she said weakly. You said you didn't want to be saddled with an old money pit. I didn't want to be guilt-tripped into being the one to take care of Mom in it forever, I shot back. That's different from wanting to be written out of her will in favor of the child she kept. Beth flinched. You think that's what this is, she said. That I kept my kids and gave you away for a house? I think I grew up in a family where my role was decided before I was born, I said. You were the one who messed up and got redeemed. I was the one who had to be grateful for existing. And now that the story is over, I'm the one who's supposed to accept a consolation prize and not make waves. It's not a consolation prize, she said. You'll get half of what's left when I die. That's in my will. Assuming we're still speaking, I said. Assuming I don't die first. Assuming your kids don't decide I'm just Mom's weird little sister and not really family. A shadow crossed her face. They love you, she said. They've always loved you. They don't know the truth either, I pointed out. Are you going to tell them? Or are we continuing the grand tradition of lying by omission? She looked stricken. I don't know how, she said. They're teenagers. It will change how they see me. Good, I said. It should. A week later, I sat Evan down at our kitchen table and told him. I didn't want him finding out from anyone else. You know how we talk about how secrets can fester, I said. Well, there's a big one in our family I just found out about. When I say grandma from now on, I really mean great-grandma. And when I say Aunt Beth, I really mean Grandma Beth. He blinked at me. Wait, he said. So Aunt Beth is your mom? Biologically, yes, I said. Legally, Grandma and Grandpa adopted me and raised me as theirs. I didn't know until last month. He considered that for a moment, then asked the most teenage question possible. Does this mean I'm not related to Grandma and Grandpa the same way I thought? You're related to them the same way, I said, just with an extra grade on there. Blood doesn't change. Names do. That's messed up, he said. Why didn't they tell you? They were scared, I said. They thought they were doing the right thing. It doesn't make it okay. He nodded slowly. You gonna find your real dad? He asked. Grandpa. The word felt strange, like a shoe that didn't quite fit yet. Maybe, I said. I'm thinking about it. I did 23andMe like every other middle-aged person with identity issues. A few weeks later, I got a notification. Close family match. 25% shared DNA. A man named Thomas Miller, age 58, living one state over. I stared at his photo. Same eyes. Same crooked bottom tooth. My heart thudded. I sent a message. Hi, Thomas. You might not know me, but based on this DNA match and some paperwork I've recently uncovered, I think you might be my biological father. It took him 3 days to answer. Lisa, he wrote, I have been waiting 38 years for this message. We're still figuring out what that relationship looks like. We've had coffee twice in a town halfway between us. He cried more than I did. He has a wife, grown kids who are technically my half-siblings, grandchildren who are technically my son's cousins. It's a lot. I don't know if we'll end up close or if it will be an occasional holiday card. But at least it's built on truth, not a script someone else wrote. As for my family of origin, things are strained, to put it mildly. Some relatives have decided I'm ungrateful for being upset at all. Your parents gave you a good life, one aunt sniffed. So they fudged some paperwork. Big deal. You could have ended up in foster care. Others are quietly appalled. One cousin pulled me aside at a barbecue and said, My mom told me a little. I can't imagine finding out like that. I'm so sorry. Beth did eventually tell her kids, in a halting, tearful conversation that she insisted I be there for. They took it better than I expected. So you had a baby when you were our age, my niece said. And Nana raised her as yours so people wouldn't talk? That's kind of messed up. It was, Beth said. We thought we were protecting everyone. We were wrong. My nephew just shrugged. So Aunt Lisa is also kind of like our sister, he said. Cool. One more sibling to annoy. Kids are resilient. Adults less so. Beth and I are in this weird limbo where sometimes we talk like sisters, sometimes like two women who share a trauma, sometimes like mother and daughter, and then immediately flinch away from it. She still calls me Lee. I still call her Beth. I can't bring myself to say Mom to her, and she hasn't asked me to. Maybe we'll get there. Maybe we won't. I can mourn the relationship we might have had if we'd been allowed to be honest from the start, and still be grateful for the one we're painstakingly building now. I've gone low contact with the rest of the older generation. Without my grandmother there as the sun we all revolved around, I don't feel obligated to keep up appearances for people who think my main sin is making a fuss instead of being lied to for 4 decades. I don't go to every family gathering anymore. I don't answer every guilt-laden group text. I protect my peace and my son's. Sometimes, late at night, when the house is quiet and Mark is snoring softly next to me, I think about that young woman in 1986, Beth at 18, scared and pregnant in a church that would have eaten her alive. I think about my grandmother, terrified of losing face, prioritizing reputation over truth. I can feel compassion for them and still be furious at the choices they made. I can understand the context and still insist on calling it what it was. A lie dressed up in Bible verses, and we did what we had to. So that's my story, internet strangers. I'm the surprise baby who grew up with very old parents and a much older sister, only to find out at 39 during a will reading that my sister is my biological mother, my mother was my grandmother, and the only reason anyone finally wrote the truth down was to justify leaving the family home and most of the money to the real bloodline. I'm the woman who had to order her own adoption papers to see her name in black and white, who found proof that her grandparents took stipends and tax breaks while telling her she was a burden they nobly took on, who tracked down a father who'd been told she wanted nothing to do with him, and who now has to figure out how to be a daughter, a niece, a granddaughter, a sister, and a mother in a family where all those titles got scrambled. If you were in my shoes, if you found out the people you called mom and dad had hidden your adoption and your true parentage your entire life, only admitting it in a legal document that also quietly cut you out of the inheritance for fairness, would you do what I'm doing and pull way back, set hard boundaries, demand honesty going forward even if it means being labeled ungrateful and dramatic? Or would you swallow the hurt, accept the house and the money going elsewhere as just another sacrifice you owe the people who raised you, and keep playing the role of the thankful surprise baby in a story someone else wrote for you?